Welcome to Trinity Wesleyan Church Online. We are so glad to have you here today. We've been praying for you, and we're excited for what God is going to be speaking to you today.
Already missing summer vacation? Just because summer is over, doesn't mean you can't keep dreaming of a salty sea. Put on your life jackets and set sail as we hear from Jesus' teachings. Sit back, relax, and set sail too. Seize the day.
Welcome to the last week of Seize the Day, the series that we've been in for the past 7 weeks now. And we are in this last week of Seize the Day is really about the teachings that Jesus did around the Sea of Galilee and teaching his disciples and doing different miracles. So we're on our last one of those today before we go into another series next week. So we've been in Mark for the past 6 weeks, and today, you guessed it, we're in John. We're going to be in John this week instead of Mark because this is something that that John really speaks well about. So John chapter 21, the very last chapter of the Gospel of John. John chapter 21, verse 3 says, "I'm going out to fish," Simon Peter told them, and they said, "We'll go with you." The disciples did not know what to do, so they went back to what they knew. It's like almost every man, like, I have nothing else, time to go fishing. It's quiet, I'm alone with my thoughts, it's comforting and just being out there in nature. And so the disciples had just gone through a lot, and they didn't know what to do next, so they went back to what they knew. Disciples went through a lot. Jesus came to them and said, "Follow me, I'm going to make you fishers of men." They were fishers of fish, but Jesus said, "I'm going to make you fish spiritually. Follow me, and I'm going to help you get close to me and understand why you're here." And there were so many miracles that Jesus did. Jesus healed the demon-possessed man, restored him back to normal where he wasn't being controlled, and threw the demons into some pigs, and 2,000 pigs jumped off a cliff and drowned themselves, and the man was fine after tormenting the city for years and years. People were afraid of him. Jesus had many healing miracles. You think about the woman who was bleeding for 12 years, and she just touched the hem of Jesus' robe. And the girl who was dead, she was 12 years old. The religious leader came up to her and said, "My daughter is dying." And then they get there, she's dead, and Jesus gives her life again. Then Jesus fed the multitude, the 5,000 and the 4,000, and Jesus calmed the storm, and the disciples are afraid, and they said, "Even the wind and waves obey him." And then Jesus walks on the water, and they're afraid. And Jesus taught them many things. He taught people many things. The Beatitudes, "Blessed is he who does this," or the Sermon on the Mount, or just learning to follow Jesus more closely and not just doing what the law says, but fulfilling the heart of the law and why it was written. He was helping people grow closer to God, to be that bridge between people and God. Then the disciples, they get to the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. Peter denies Jesus 3 times. Peter cut off the guard's ear when they came to get Jesus, and then Jesus puts the guy's ear back on. The disciples fall asleep when they're supposed to be praying. Thomas, not doubting Thomas. Thomas, because doubts bring us closer to God. It says, "Blessed is he who believes and doesn't see." He doesn't say it's wrong to doubt. It's just more complicated. It's not as simple as what it could be. And so the disciples have gone through so much with Jesus in these 3 years that Jesus was on earth. And they don't know what else to do, so they go back to what they knew. They went fishing. So here we are at John chapter 21, the end of verse 3. It says, "So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing." This is the preparation for what Jesus is going to do. It's the setup of what Jesus is going to do. I believe it's on purpose. Don't go back to what you knew. Focus on me. It's all about Jesus. It's all about following him. And Jesus is preparing. I don't believe that Jesus let them catch any fish that night so he could set up what's going to happen. We're not supposed to go back to what we knew before Jesus. Like, I used to do this and then I met Christ and then I just went back to what I knew because I didn't know what else to do. That's not why Jesus died. That's not why Jesus beat sin and death and resurrected. But repentance is making a full 180, turning all the way around, not even looking back at who you used to be. Paul writes, "Should we go on sinning so grace may abound? By no means." But we go back. We go back to what we knew. I mean, you remember the thing that you were up at the altar, you're crying about, you're crying your eyes out and asking God for forgiveness. And then you go back. Why did you go back? It doesn't satisfy. You wake up feeling guilty. Right after it happens, you feel horrible. You run to it where we should be running to God and asking for his help. God didn't tell you to go back to that relationship that is unhealthy and makes you feel terrible. God didn't tell you to type in that website. God didn't tell you to go and waste all that money. I have no money. I can't take care of my family. I can't do these things. God didn't tell you to do that. God didn't tell you to go back to being uncaring and unloving and just being a mean-spirited person. He didn't tell us to go back to talking about people behind their back and just being, again, a mean-spirited person. He didn't tell us to go back to being the person you were before you encountered Christ. He said, "Follow me." Jenna and I talk about this topic many times, and we say these words. It's almost exact every single time. I wish I could force people to make the right decisions. I wish I could force them to make the right decisions because I see what's going to happen. I see what's going to happen if they go back. And this is why a lot of pastors give up and stop pastoring. It gets tiring. It emotionally, spiritually draining, where you're just like, I've put so much into this person and I tried to help them to understand God and understand what their life and how it could be different if they just trust God, and they go back for whatever reason. They stop following God and they go back to what they knew. There was a teen I was discipling who struggled with porn, and I told him, I said, if you don't get this figured out now, the urge is going to get stronger. You're going to get into deeper and deeper things. It's going to be bad for you. You're going to want to reach out to something that is more because you want that relationship. You just want more and more. That's how sin is. It gives you more and more, but feeling more and more guilty. And you just want more, and you keep going in this cycle. I said, if you don't figure this out, it's going to get worse. I could see you ending up getting arrested or going to jail. We keep meeting. About 6 months later, he was arrested for molesting a girl. And I was just thinking, I told him this would happen. I told him this would happen, and it happened. This is Christians all across the world. These are some pastors who were the closest to God and chose to fall away from God for who they used to be. I mean, so many pastors have stepped down from ministry. It's in the headlines from Hillsong and New Spring and Mars Hill, Willow Creek, because they got comfortable where they were. And they wanted to go back to who they were. And even this past week, a musical artist went separate ways from someone who decided to go back to their old self. I mean, it can come at any point in your journey with God. I mean, guess who was with Jesus the whole time and was a follower of Christ? It was the one who betrayed Jesus. It was Judas. Even those who are close to Jesus can go back to their old ways, and we could too. It's a warning not to go back. Because where you get comfortable is where you become vulnerable. Rest is different than being comfortable. Rest is a commandment from God that we should rest one day a week. It is good for your body. It is good for the earth. It is good for your stress level and your blood pressure. But comfort is not promised. And it shouldn't be something that we strive toward. Comfort as a goal, the Bible does not endorse that. Anything higher than God is an idol. Again, I'm not saying it's wrong to have things, but the goal, but it's not the goal of living close to God. Following Jesus changes your course. It's not just, I'm just going to do what I want to do and hopefully God will give me enough grace. But it changes everything into who you're really meant to be. He comes in and changes us and pulls us back to who God created us to be. Verse 4, early in the morning, translated, becomes dawn or daybreak. I used to sleep as a teen. I used to be so scared of the dark. And turns out it's because I see worse than other people in the dark, and my eyes don't adjust to the dark very well, and my mind would play tricks on me, and I kept thinking I was seeing things. So I slept with a lamp on throughout the night, and it took me hours to fall asleep because I thought I kept hearing things or I kept seeing things. And I would wake up multiple times a night, and it took forever to fall back asleep. But when the dawn, when the morning, when the light came, I slept the best. Nothing to be afraid of anymore. I can see everything. I slept like a rock. And I did this up until college. I slept like this. I knew I was safe because the morning was there. I mean, part of that, I'm thinking it was probably trauma from when our house was broken into when I was 4 years old, and I never got over that at that point. But when the morning came, my best rest, my best sleep happened. Early in the morning is foreshadowing about what Jesus is about to do. It's a poetic way of saying, I'm here, it's new. In Lamentations, it says, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Verse 4, early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, hey friends, haven't you any fish? Jesus didn't let them catch any fish. One of Jesus' greatest pranks. No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the other side of the boat, and then you're going to find some. And when they did, they were unable to haul in the net because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish. Seems like Simon Peter got out of the hard work, and I'm just going to swim to shore. For they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have just caught. So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to him, come and have breakfast. It wasn't just breakfast. It was restoration. It was something new. It was in the morning. It was dawn. It was not just getting food, but it was a restoration, restoring Peter to who Peter was. He's saying, Peter, go get some of those fish I let you catch. I need you to remember something. Remember when Jesus fed the multitude and each disciple carried a full basket of fish and bread? Go get that reminder, Peter. But it's beyond the physical reminder. It goes much deeper than that. Peter followed Jesus up until close to the end. I mean, just chapters ago in John chapter 18, this is where Peter stopped following Jesus. He stopped following him. It was the first denial of knowing Jesus. And in verse 17 it says, "You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you?" she asked Peter. He replied, "I am not." It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Not long after, Peter denied Jesus 2 more times. Peter stopped following, let his fears drive his soul, and he went back to what he knew. He was afraid he would be killed for knowing Jesus because Rome wasn't happy with Jesus. Rome wasn't happy with the people following Jesus. So if they weren't happy with Jesus, they're getting ready to kill Jesus. Why wouldn't they kill his followers too? And especially the people that he was closest to. So he's afraid, and he said, I don't know this guy. I've never seen him. I don't even know who this guy is. And there's 2 instances of the word fire here. Only 2 instances of this word fire here. It says, when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals. That's 1 in John chapter 21. And then the servants and officials stood around a fire. It's not the only 2 times the word fire is used in the Bible, because there's many other instances. The burning bush, the cloud of fire. But it's the only 2 instances used in this exact way. And when it's talked about, it's specifically a coal fire. It's the only 2 places in the Bible that use this Greek word coal fire. And when Peter denied Jesus, and once when Jesus said it's time to move past this issue, he said, let me bring you back to me. Smell is one of those memory inducers. It's the biggest memory inducer. You smell something, it just takes you back. There is a musty basement smell that I absolutely love. It takes me back to when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and our washer and dryer, we'd have to go down these concrete steps into this basement. And when I smell that smell, it takes me back to 1146 West 6th Street in Marion, Indiana, 46953. I know exactly where it takes me to. I can picture that basement. I know what it looks like because that smell takes me back. And when I smell that smell anytime in my life, it takes me back to there. And sometimes this method is used in counseling to help people overcome their issues that they've been dealing with. And they use smell as something that takes you back to a place you may not remember. And then the smell comes up and it takes you back to where it is. It gives you a lot more memory of that instance. When Peter got onto the land, he smelled that fire. Ooh, I'm hungry. It's distinct. It's strong. You know that smell. But what memory do you think Peter went back to when he smelled that coal fire? Uh-oh. I remember what happened. Uh-oh, Jesus remembers. There's a reason Jesus had a coal fire going when Peter came on shore. It was first the setup to get Peter to the shore, and now it's the restoration. Jesus set it up. He wasn't allowing them to get fish, and then he reminded them that he is the one that said, cast your net on the other side, and they get all the fish. That happened twice. Jesus is reminding him who is in charge, who he's supposed to be following. Jesus said that Peter is the rock and he will build his church on him. We're getting Peter back to that solid foundation. In chapter 1, chapter 21. It says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. When you read this in English, it's just like, man, Jesus is really asking him a lot. It's like, yeah, stop asking him. Like, yes, he said he loves you back. You read it in the words in the Greek, you see love, because in the Greek they had 4 different instances of the word love. There's phileo, the brotherly friendship type love, and agape love. There's 2 others that we don't need to talk about. Jesus says, do you agape me? He said, yeah, like I love you like a brother. I phileo you. No, Simon, do you agape me? Would you do anything for me? Would you put me at the highest priority of your life? He's like, yeah, like a brother, I'd do anything for you. Simon, that's not the question I'm asking. And so I'm just going to change it for you. Simon, do you love me like a friend? Do you love me like a brother? And he says, yes, like I phileo you. Simon, would you do anything for me? Yeah, like a brother, like a friend. Simon, would you do anything for me? Yeah, I just told you, like a brother, like I'd do anything for you. And finally, it seems like Jesus is probably more hurt than anything. It seems like Jesus is hurt by it, and so he changes it to meet Peter where he's at. Okay, Simon, do you love me like a brother? Let me make sure we're getting on the same page. Yeah. Like a brother. And it's frustrating, it's annoying. I just want to like start punching my punching bag right now, and I just want to, Simon, get it together. Like, it's not the happy ending that I want. But Jesus meets us where we are. Jesus meets us where we are. And even when we don't fully understand God, Jesus restores us back to him. Even when we don't understand the question and we say yeah and we do it, Jesus still brings us back to himself. They were speaking 2 different languages that day. Simon was hurt by the questioning. He asked Peter 3 times. Almost seems like a punishment for the 3 times he denied Jesus. For each time you denied me, I need you to understand how much you hurt me. That could be true, but I think it's more than that. Each time Jesus asked Simon, Simon had to acknowledge his sinfulness. He let his best friend down. And even further, every single time, Simon Peter had to acknowledge Jesus deeper and to understand. Let me put it like this. Sometimes when our girls are playing, or sometimes when they're eating or on their iPad or whatever, we have to really get their attention. You're just like, hey girls, Ellie, Ava, I love you. Yeah, I love you. Ellie, Ava, I love you. Yeah, I love you. Jeez, stop bothering me. Girls, look at me. I love you. And they look at me and they're like, oh, I love you. Because kids get in the zone. And I think Peter was in that part where he's just like, yeah. Like, I love you. And Jesus is saying, no, but do you love me? Like, don't just brush it off. But he had to acknowledge it each time. Like, he had to get closer and closer. And finally, Jesus like, do you love me? And Jesus is saying, pay attention to me. Do you hear the words I'm saying? No, not a friendship love. Stop. No, pay attention. An everlasting love. Simon, no, not a friendship love. Simon, do you love me and put me as the highest priority in your life? Because anything less than everything is not enough. And it's the same question that Jesus is asking us today. I believe we have unfinished business today. And it's a call to come back to where Jesus has asked us to go as a church. We've had these all-in bracelets, and we've had them since April. And we had about 25 people who signed those cards, say, for 1 full year, I'm going all in. And I see most people are still wearing theirs. You don't have to wear it to go all in on your commitment, but it's a reminder for us to go all in even when you don't feel like it. And I believe that God is asking us as a church today, are you still going all in? It's been about 5 or 6 months. Are you still going all in on your commitment? For 1 full year, I'm going to give everything to God. And we're going to see what God does with this church for 1 full year. For 1 full year, I'm going to start talking to my coworkers and my neighbors and get them to know me, so I can start to invite them to church, and I can tell them my life story, and I can tell them how Jesus has changed me. Are you going all in and giving 10% of your income and saying, even when I don't understand, even when it's difficult, even when I have nothing else, I'm going to give that 10% first? That in everything I do, I'm going to follow Jesus all in. That I'm going to have that agape, that everlasting, I would do anything for you love. This isn't me just like, oh, I think they need to do better. I think they need to do this. And I've been wrestling through this for a long time. And I haven't wanted to talk about it. But God was telling me this week, you have to talk about this. You have to bring this back. And I believe it's the same question that Jesus is asking us. Do you love me? And for a lot of us, yes, I know people that are going all in, that they're trying, they're doing everything they can. And for some of us, on the other hand, we're a lot like Peter, where we've gone back to what's comfortable and what we know. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going all in. And then you're just like, oh, I got to do that. Oh, I'm just going to go back to this. It's a lot easier. And Jesus is saying, do you love me? Would you do everything for me like you said you would? Do you love me? And sometimes it's going to take us a while to understand and get out of our rhythm and get out of our comfort, so we can finally look Jesus in the eye and say, I'm back. I'm back. I'm doing this. This is my commitment. Even if you've fallen away from that commitment, today is a day of restoration for you and for our church, so that our community can have days and years and decades of restoration, of coming back to Jesus. It's not just Peter. He's not the only one that messed up. And a lot of times we mess up and we go back. But Jesus today is saying, do you love me? Would you do anything for me? Do you love me? Do you love me?